Well, it's good to have you back in the rig coming down the road with us. Get a chance to visit about some meaty issues today, the kind of meat and potato issues that are on everybody's plate. You're thinking about them. Let me give you an example. The spring work, certainly here in the Valley, where I'm at, has been absolutely brutal. Farmers can't get in the field. We're past that deadline. Now there's going to be reductions when it comes to crop insurance, everything that goes with it. They're already looking at switching up on what crop they'll be raising, whether or not. I'm actually hearing the word sunflower more than what I've heard it in past, because obviously you can plant it a little bit later and it's worth something now. Sunflower, canola, those type of things, the oil seeds. But it's just been a brutal spring for farmers, for ag producers, and they really don't know where they can turn if it keeps raining like this. You know, my dad always said, never bitch about the rain. Well, I don't know. I think some of these guys are bitching about the rain, and I don't blame them one bit. Going to talk a little bit with Dan Wogslin with the North Dakota Grain Growers about that. But first and foremost, you can't turn on any TV without seeing people talk about what happened in Texas. When you see fourth graders, when you see 21 people shot in a school and 22 die, I think that's the number we have to use, because one of the teacher's husbands has a heart attack. As his kids put it, he died of a broken heart. When you see that, it's one of the kids took blood from another child that was killed, smeared it on herself so she could look dead and the shooter wouldn't shoot her. Think about that. Now put it in relation to your child and think about how that's going to affect the rest of her life. So it isn't just the dead. It isn't just those that were killed, that were brutally murdered. It's the effect it's going to have on everyone in that community for a long, long time. There's all this talk about what teachers could do, what teachers should do. You know, we should arm teachers. We should train teachers to deal with someone like this, when in fact they went to school to be trained to be teachers. You know, ND United, North Dakota United, is an organization that represents public workers, right? We're talking about guys in snowplows. We're talking about ladies out there working in public health, you know, and we're talking about teachers and teachers. Nick Archuleta is the head of that. I want to visit with him. Nick, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Thank you for having me, Joel.
You're a teacher. I mean, that was your calling. You were asked by teachers to take this position and represent them because they knew you could do it in a professional and educated manner. And so you still, at your very core, are a teacher. I've known you for a number of years. Nick, how do you feel as a teacher about what you're seeing play out in our classrooms?
Well, heartbroken, in a word, Joel. What happened in Uvalde, what happened in Newtown, Connecticut, what happened at Parkland, these are devastating events. And it's not just for those people in the school who sadly lost their lives, but for the entire community. This is a problem that, frankly, we have seen reoccur and reoccur and reoccur, and we're waiting for some action to be taken to help to curb this sort of violence. It's not what people went into the profession for, and so we need all the help we can get. We need to stop talking past each other in the halls of Congress and in state legislatures. We need to come up with something that's viable, that is doable. You can have the Second Amendment and decent gun laws that help to protect all citizens. They're not mutually exclusive.
So let's talk about what's happening in the hallways in schools, because this is a topic of conversation amongst all teachers that I know, and quite frankly, parents as well. They want action. They want action. They're not trying to pretend they know exactly what that action should be. They pay members of Congress to do that part of the job. What they want, though, is they want action. What are they saying? Should they be part of this? Are some of the proposals that are out there that teachers need to have concealed carry weapons permits? What are you hearing teachers say?
Well, we've heard teachers consistently over the years. Now, keep in mind that we're not a monolithic organization. We do have differences of opinion, but overwhelmingly, teachers are against carrying guns or being asked to carry guns in their classrooms. Teachers aren't law enforcement. The skill sets necessary for those two jobs, law enforcement and teaching, are way different. Teachers are taught, and it comes naturally to them in most cases, but to nurture students, to help students to achieve the best they can achieve, and to make themselves ready academically and for life after school. That's they're not trained to be law enforcement officers, and to ask them to do that, frankly, Joel, is really putting a lot on their plates when they have already got a plate that's overflowing with responsibilities and duties that they must do.
It isn't as though, Nick, that there weren't people there with guns. I mean, you look at the shooting that just happened in Buffalo. You look at what happened in Texas. There were people with guns, and it still happened. We're talking about murders and flak jackets is what we're talking about. And so I think asking, I'm just going to use this as the example. And I want everybody at home to think about this. Go back in your life and think of your teacher that made the biggest difference in your life. There are many that instantly come to mind. Bill Herlichka, Greta Koppen, Leska Stack, Vern Whelan. I don't see in any one of those teachers' personalities the ability to stop an armed shooter with an AK. There is nothing in those personalities that's going to take Greta Koppen and turn her into the defense mechanism of taking on a murderous thug like this. And I think we're mixing worlds here, Nick. I think we're asking people who are trained in on one thing and who have a different personality to now be someone that can take on a problem and an issue that they didn't create nor did they study for.
Well, that's it exactly, Joel. I mean, we each have to kind of maintain our lanes, know what we're good at, do the very best of our ability to complete our jobs. And law enforcement, by and large, does a wonderful job of that. Teachers, I know for a fact, do an excellent job of that. So to ask teachers to take on this extra role is over the top. And frankly, that's the wrong simplistic answer to this larger question.
So has there been any effort? Obviously, you're organized here in my home state, in North Dakota. You represent that. And in my time in the legislature, I was able to draw on that, to be able to use that level of expertise. But state to state, has anyone, because you know each other, have you been speaking to the representative, the person that has your job in South Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, places that are watching this right now? Is there an effort to collectively, nationwide, as teachers, to take this issue on?
There is. And, it seems like after every one of these horrific school shootings, there's an increased focus on this particular issue. But then people sort of, let it go because we're in such a fast-paced news cycle and our world is fast-paced. It'll just sort of drift off the front pages and out of people's minds until the next one happens. But as I speak with my counterparts in other states, they're not willing to let this one go. This one, like all the others, are tragic, but we're just at the end of our rope. What are we going to do? What steps can we possibly take? And when we look at the inaction in Washington, D.C. on this particular issue, it's frustrating. Because we know that we are having a very difficult time, not just in North Dakota, but around the country, recruiting teachers into the profession and then retaining them once they're in the profession. When they see an action about something like this, it absolutely is dismaying. I heard a story of a woman this morning. I was with some retired teachers in Fargo, and one woman was not planning on retiring, but she came home from school one day last week after this shooting, and her husband said, "I'm ready for you to retire." And she said, I'm about there myself. So, I mean, when we see these things happening around the country, it is having an effect on teachers in North Dakota. It is very difficult to recruit and retain teachers now. If we don't get our arms around this issue and do it soon, it's going to make that job all the more difficult.
What do they see in their students' eyes? I mean, these were fourth graders. These were kids with their any kid in school has their whole life ahead of them. And so when they're back in that classroom, and I realize in Texas they're not back in that classroom yet. They're talking about raising the school so that no child has to go back in there and think, okay, this was the corner, this was the classroom. Good. Take the dozer. Take the dozer to the building and start all over. I get that. But that doesn't change the fact that the people that you represent know what's in those kids' eyes. What are they seeing? What are they hearing from their students?
Well, I can't tell you exactly what every teacher is hearing from their students, but I can tell you from the teachers' perspectives, Joel, that they are all about promise. They look in the faces of these kids, particularly these young elementary school age children, the second through fourth grade and beyond, and they see promise, the promise that kid has. They don't know which one of those kids is going to matriculate through the school system and then go out and find a cure for cancer, or to go out and find the next best thing. These kids are full of potential, and teachers are all about helping children reach their potential. The young life gets snuffed out for no reason, for absolutely no reason. That has a very draining effect on teachers. We love our students. It's just unbelievable. We partner with parents to make sure that their kids have every possible decent opportunity to succeed. And so when something like this happens, it really cuts to the quick.
Welcome back, folks. We're still visiting with Nick Archuleta, the head of ND United. He represents teachers. He's the one that talks to them every day. He's a teacher himself. Nick, I was thinking about what teachers could do. This whole notion that they are the front line of defense as though they're law enforcement. We spoke to that just now. But I want to talk about what they can do. I know so many teachers myself. They know some of these kids that are troubled. That if there was a deep background search and somebody did talk to them, the world, the United States might look differently at whether or not they would allow him to buy a gun. Could teachers help out there?
Yeah, I think they could, Joel. You're right that oftentimes students spend as much time in school as they do at home. And so teachers do get a good look and see how the young people interact with one another, how they interact with other adults. And they can sense when a student is frustrated and then see them, if they see them every day and they see some repeated behaviors, they can, of course, report those. And in many cases, they do report those. To say, I've got some concerns about this individual. One of the problems is that we don't have, Joel, enough behavioral health specialists to go around in our school systems. There just aren't enough people trained up to do it. And that's the same is true with mental health professionals dedicated to children and adolescents who might be having some issues and are there at the ready to help. And so what we need to, I believe, one of the things that we can work on, if this is a mental health issue, and I believe in part it is, but not exclusively, I think that we can be doing more to encourage people to enter that particular field. And Congress can be doing more to allocate more monies, make those available to communities so that they can train up these folks to take their role in our schools and helping our students to succeed.
Well, and I've been saying on the radio show and here on the TV show that complaining really isn't going to get us anywhere without offering solutions yourself. I know that you're a proponent of red flag laws. I think that is more than worthy of a discussion. I'm a advocate big time of deep background checks. Anyone that can't wait a week, heck, a month, to get a gun hasn't planned very well when it comes to hunting season, when it comes to target shooting, everything else that goes with it. And so if I have to wait a month for them to do a deep background check, checking out the things I put on social media, checking out from my neighbors, my school teachers, my parents in this particular case, you know what? Let's wait. Let's wait. You still get the opportunity, and nobody took the gun from you unless it's deserved. So, that to me is one of the solutions. You mentioned mental health. When you go to Western North Dakota, the one thing I consistently hear from people is that there's no provider. They can't find a provider, which to me means that there's not enough monetary incentive to do it. I mean, some of the things are fixable, or at least an attempt to fix, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, Joel. I mean, if you take a look at the shooters the murderers that pull off these mass shootings at schools, there's a common thread that weaves among them. Most of them are loners. They don't have any sort of contact with criminal elements, so they couldn't get their hands on an illegal gun because they don't have that kind of connection. So let's focus our efforts on where they're getting these legal guns and making sure that they're okay to do it. Let's take a look at the laws. Why is it that you can go into someplace and buy an AR rifle when you're 18 years old, when you have to be 21 to get a handgun? I agree with you on the background checks. We should be doing a deeper, more intensive background checks. Is that going to catch them all? No, but it has caught several, hasn't it? And we don't even know. We hear about school shootings. We almost never hear about those school shootings that are stopped because of preventative measures that have been taken. So I think that the red flag laws is way more than worthy of a discussion. We should be having that discussion right now. And that discussion should be going on in state legislatures as well as at the federal level.
See, and I don't get why people don't demand that. 18-year-olds don't belong buying an AR. They don't. And anyone who sits there and makes the argument, well, they get a gun when they get into the military, they don't get a gun when they get into the military until they're trained in and prove they can have that weapon. So let's not confuse those two things. Also, what frustrates me is when they sit there and they say, well, see, that didn't stop this, did it? Like you said, we don't know how many it did stop or would stop. It's just so ridiculous. And so this one is so easy to see that groundswell. It does feel different. You are right about that. But here's the point. It's always about buying time. We were getting to the point where nobody was talking about or thinking about Buffalo anymore. Nobody was talking about or thinking about what happened in church in California anymore. And then along comes this. And it just feels like boom, boom, boom. And then you involve little kids, and now I get the sense we've had it. And so I don't know what it's going to take for legislators who have completely aligned themselves to the NRA. But I do know this. I know it because I can feel it. A huge, overwhelming majority of America expects action. And I don't know if you're getting that same pulse, Nick.
I am, and I'm thinking that most people, in North Dakota, when we talk about energy, we talk about an all of the above approach to energy development. Same thing with this issue. There is literally no political price to pay to pass legislation that 80% of Americans support. And that's Democrats and Republicans. They support red flag laws. They support better and deeper background checks. There's not a political penalty to play. So let's quit pretending that there is and start really taking a look at what is possible. Politics is the art of what's possible, right? We hear that all the time. So let's just see that. Quit talking past each other. Sit down at the same table, roll up your sleeves, and get to work and do something that 80% of Americans want you to do. And I think it's almost as simple as that.
What about the structure that your folks work in itself? What about the safety of the building? Are teachers being talked to and visited with about that?
Yes. In fact, I do know where they're building new schools, they in most school districts, and I believe this is true whether you're a large district or a small one, they do take input from teachers about how they want the school to be laid out. And that is part of that all of above approach we said. If you look at a lot of the newer schools that are getting built, they have, for example, curved walls. So there isn't a straight line of sight just in case there was a shooter in the school. They don't have a straight line of view down a long hallway. They can't see around that corner or that curve. And so that's one area. Better doors, better windows. I don't think there's anything like, bulletproof drywall. So we have to do a better job of making sure that our schools are safe. And there's no doubt about that. And I think we are doing that. But that's just one component. One thing that we can be doing as a society is insisting that social emotional learning be taught in schools. And that involves teaching about self-awareness, self-management. responsible decision making, relationship skills, and social awareness. We need to really make sure that that's a core component of education in our schools, and that our schools develop that culture. And our communities then will develop that culture too, so that we're not getting to the point where we have people slipping through the cracks. The shooter at Uvalde, for example, has a long history of being harassed and bullied over a speech impediment. Those sort of things don't sit well with the young kids, and so if we are able to nip that in the bud very early through social emotional learning, then all the better for all of us, I would say. But as I mentioned before, this is all of the above. We can't just look at one component and say, that's what it's going to be. This is the silver bullet, no pun intended, none taken, I hope. But we have to really work on all these different components to solve this problem.
So how many years were you a teacher, Nick?
22.
22 years. And I'm sure you've had debates over curriculum. I'm sure you've had debates over disruptive children, about class size, issues that matter in the classroom. I get that.
Yeah.
Those are things that you should be talking to school boards on. Did you ever think in all of those years that the main focus that you were going to be working on was going to be how to stop shooting in the very schools you taught in?
No, sir, I did not. When I was training up to become a teacher, we didn't even talk about that in our university classes. We didn't talk about shooter drills and things on that order. But we have to avoid making our schools look like prisons. We want those schools to be the safest places that kids can be, and by and large they are, despite the horrific news of late. So we really do need to sit down, roll up our sleeves, get to work, and work together to solve what I think is a very basic issue, and that's student safety and educator safety.
Keep fighting, Nick, keep fighting, because you're not just fighting for the teachers that you represent, but you're fighting for those kids. And I think every teacher I know would say that's the most important thing. So thanks for coming down the road with us.